Alright, so there are some big changes coming for healers in 10.2. Blizzard gave us a blue post talking about the issues as they see them and what they're trying to do to fix them. I'm going to go over the patch notes, so the healing blue post and the first set of patch notes for 10.2. I'm only going to be talking about healers. I'm not going to be reading every single line, I'm just going to go over the highlights, so to speak. So Blizzard's goal is that they want healers to have interesting abilities and choices to make when healing. They want healers to have to manage their mana pool. They want to reduce the amount of overhealing and make mana matter a little bit more than it currently does. They also think that single target healing spells currently don't feel like they move health bars enough, and they think that group healing spells move them too much. They're saying here as well that they hope that these single target healing buffs will help healers in Mythic Plus dungeons. I hope that this is almost like a tacit admission that healing participation in Mythic Plus has kind of fallen, maybe not off a cliff, but it's definitely declined over the past couple of months, and that Blizzard thinks that buffing single target healing for healers should hopefully make healing keys a little bit less stressful, and maybe more people will do it, or do it more often. Now, it's interesting here that Blizzard talks about group healing spells that have become too powerful due to the power creep a lot of them have received in Dragonflight, and they specifically talk about group healing rapidly increasing raid health from a damage state to a full health state, and that they say adjusting the effectiveness, but they're just nerfing a lot of these spells. It feels a lot like Blizzard saw Theon's video, where he talked about the problems in Mythic raids at the moment, where health bars move up too quickly, raid damage patterns are too bursty because healers are too powerful, and now they're taking the axe to healers in a couple of different ways to try and fix that issue. Raid survivability cooldowns are also too strong in Blizzard's estimation. And finally, mana generation is a problem that's related to all of the above. They want mana to feel like a finite resource, and for the few ways that mana can still be generated to be relevant. And they say here as well that they want your spell selection during a raid fight to matter. Look, this entire blue post is really just about raid. They're talking about healing in raid, stacking cooldowns in raid, and health bars moving too much in raid. I don't disagree that these are problems. Like, I don't disagree with Theon's video that Mythic raid healing in particular has become a little bit too spiky. Damage patterns are too, like, the whole raid will just lose 70% of their health and then get topped back up and then lose it again and get topped back up. But the issue I have with this is that Blizzard are taking a global approach to healers, to tuning healers, to try and fix them in one specific environment in the game. As for what is specifically changing, at least for now, Innovate duration is nerfed from 10 seconds to 8. Resto Druids as a whole are getting a lot of changes. I don't want to go through every single line here. Suffice it to say that Blizzard are making the Grove Guardian new talent that just got added in 10.1.7 a big part of the Resto Druid toolkit. They're nerfing AoE healing like Wild Growth and Spring Blossoms and Embrace the Dream. But the big change for Resto Druids is the Flourish change. So Flourish is getting nerfed by, I don't know, like 75% or something. Flourish will now extend the duration of all your heal over time effects on friendly targets within 60 yards by 6 seconds was 8, so it's losing 2 seconds on the duration, and increases the rate of your heal over time effects by 25% was 100. So that, along with the nerf to Luxuriant Soil, which now causes Rejuvenation to have a 2% chance to jump to a nearby ally instead of 3. These two talents, or these two parts of the Restoration Druid toolkit, are the lion's share of their healing in raid. The way Resto Druids currently play is that they stack as many rejuves as possible, which is also why they stack as much haste as possible, in the hopes that every tick of a rejuve has a chance to jump effectively and start a new rejuve on a new target. So what Druids do is they stack their rejuves, they pray that they get a few of these 3% procs, and then they flourish. And the 100% increased rate of healing over time effects causes this 3% proc to proc quite often, and then ideally, or the goal is that they blanket the raid in rejuves all the time. And then obviously they also press convoke the spirits every minute, and they pray that they get flourish procs in their convoke. So these changes, the luxuriant soil nerf, the flourish nerf, is probably like half of Resto Druid's raid healing throughput wiped away with those two changes alone. And then Rejuve itself gets buffed by 25%. So 25% added on to half of what they originally had is, I feel like this is a ballpark of about a Resto Druid's currently losing maybe 1/3 of their throughput in raid. And that's if they play in next tier effectively the same way they play in this tier. But obviously there are some other things being added in here too, like the buffs to Grove Guardians and the single target buffs through Cenarian Ward and Regrowth. I don't think they touched Life Bloom, but you know, Swift Mend healing increased and the Tree of Life change. If I had to estimate, yeah, I'd say Resto Druids with these patch notes are probably losing about 1/3, maybe 20% of their throughput in raid. Now, the patch note that was added a couple of hours ago is that Flourish is going from a 90-second cooldown to a 60-second cooldown. It is interesting to read things like this developer's note. We're reducing the effectiveness of Flourish and increasing the power of rotational heal over time spells with the goal of moving more power into the baseline toolkit. This is with the nerf to Flourish that can be procced by Convoke, will only extend HOTS by 3 seconds was 4. I don't think that these nerfs do what this note thinks they do. I think Resto Druids are still going to get most of their throughput from Rejuve. They're still probably going to have to take Luxuriant Soil, and they're still probably going to have to play in a very similar way next tier than they do now. It's just that's going to be much less healing. Even with Regrowth initial heal being increased by 20% and the heal over time increased by 42% and Swift Mend increased, there's nothing here that buffs or nerfs or makes any changes at all to Wild Growth. So even with all of these changes, Resto Druids are still going to step into raid. They're still going to press Wild Growth roughly on cooldown. They're still going to spam Rejuve. They're still going to press whatever their cooldowns are every minute, or Tranquility or whatever, with Flourish or Tree of Life or Convoke. And they're still going to try and proc as many of these Rejuve spreads from Luxuriant Soil as possible. It's just they're going to have much less output when they do all that. We also see the 2 and 4 set bonus. I believe that's another change that came a couple of hours ago, is that they've been nerfed. There are a lot of set bonuses at the moment on the PTR that are so unbelievably busted that it's pretty obvious that this is the set bonuses that were put on the PTR are Blizzard's first draft. They've just thrown some numbers at a general idea and, you know, they'll see how it goes and they'll tune it as time goes on. But talking about them in any great detail at the moment is probably a bit of a waste of time because some of them are just so strong that there's no way in hell that they go live as is. All right, on to Preservation Evoker. Nowhere near as many changes here. The healers that got a big set of changes are Resto Druid and Discipline Priest. So Preservation, Spirit Bloom healing buffed by 25%, Living Flame by 20, Verdant Embrace by 35, Resonating Sphere. This is the talent that causes Temporal Anomaly to apply Echo to, it used to be 6 targets, and then it was, well, Blizzard were intending on nerfing it to 4. Everyone kind of cried about it on the forums, and the feedback was that's a terrible change, so Blizzard reduced it from 6 to 5 so that you could still Temporal Anomaly and Echo your whole party in Mythic Plus. And now they're going from 5 to 3. There's also a nerf to Cycle of Life. I don't think this is a huge deal, the Cycle of Life change. Now accumulates 10% instead of 15 of your healing over 8 seconds was 10. Cycle of Life in a lot of situations was somewhere between 8 or maybe 10% of your throughput in a raid. This nerf probably isn't going to change that very much. Maybe it'll be 6 or 7% or something, but it's still a passive talent that's going to heal people. It's not really something you play around. Not a huge change. The Resonating Sphere change, however, is enormous. I look at this and I really start to wonder how Preservation Evokers are going to heal Mythic Plus keys. Using Temporal Anomaly to apply echoes to your whole party is a currently very important or a very useful tool to healing keys. It allows Preservation Evokers to do some cool things as well, with things like echoing your whole party, pressing Verdant Embrace, and then channeling your Emerald Communion. as an extra cooldown. It also obviously allows you to do nice things like blanket your whole party in double Dream Breath hots or cover your whole party in reversion hots. It allows you to rely on things like the Grace Period talent, where your reversion increases healing on targets with reversion by 10% per reversion. So the ability to do something like Temporal Anomaly, cover your whole party in echoes, and then press reversion was a nice way of guaranteeing that your whole party gets a 20% healing taken buff. But this change, it doesn't really destroy all of those things. It makes them all much less reliable, especially considering that Echo is really only going on 2 people in a Mythic Plus group, because the first Echo is always going to be on the preservation on you. Blizzard have been trying to sneak this in now for a couple of months or a couple of patches. They really don't like the playstyle of pressing Temporal Anomaly to apply echoes to your party. They want you to press echo, I think. The Verdant Embrace healing increase is also a bit of a strange one. This seems like someone in the office has been told, go through and buff the single target healing, specifically casted healing of a lot of healers by, 20, 30%, whatever. And they've, Verdant Embrace increased by 35%. Sounds fantastic. The problem is that Verdant Embrace isn't really used as a spot heal. Verdant Embrace, at least as Preservation currently plays, is used more like a button to apply Life Bind if you're going to do something like the Emerald Communion trick, or to empower your next Dream Breath. This is a change that on paper might look like, oh yeah, okay, it's a buff to the spot healing of Preservation Evoker, but I don't think it really plays out like that. The Living Flame healing increase, however, is a spot healing increase, which is kind of nice. And the Spirit Bloom healing increased by 25%. This Preservation as a whole, this is just a set of nerfs in my estimation. And that's because next tier, Preservation Evokers are going to lose their current 2-piece, which is currently a 40% buff to Spirit Bloom. So Preservations are going to go from a 40% buff on Spirit Bloom to a 25% buff. Worse. Living Flame increased by 20%. Not a huge deal. They don't really get a lot of their healing out of Living Flame at the moment. And Verdant Embrace healing to try and buff their spot healing, but it isn't generally used as a spot heal. So it's a buff, but it's not a big one in the way that Blizzard probably thinks it is. And Resonating Sphere nerfs from 5 echoes to 3 is just, that's a big deal. Maybe not in Raid, but in Keys, I feel like this is quite a large nerf. The saving grace at the moment for Preservation is their set bonuses. I'll talk about those in a little bit, but they are very strong at the moment. And they changed their playstyle in quite a big way. Next up is Mistweaver. Life Cocoon healing increased by 33%. Yep, they'll take it. Soothing Mist healing increased by 40%. Enveloping Mist by 25%. Unfortunately, Misty Peak's taking quite a large nerf from 10% to 5% on its proc chance. Unfortunately, this is one of those things where I think that Misty Peaks will still be fairly mandatory, especially in Raid. Even at half the current healing it does, it's still quite a lot of throughput to get for 2 talent points. It's just going to be worse than it was. Enveloping Breath heals 5 targets instead of 6, not a huge deal. Invigorating Mist's healing is increased by 25% and reduced beyond 5 targets. This is the cleave heal attached to Vivify. So when you cast Vivify, it casts a direct heal on someone, and then it cleave heals all the people with Renewing Mist on them. So that cleave heal is being increased by 25%, and it's being reduced beyond 5 targets. This is an enormous nerf to raid healing in particular. The way Mistweavers raid heal at the moment is they spread their Renewing Mists onto as many targets as possible, and then they press Vivify. And that means pressing Vivify, multiple times, but that means pressing it when there's 15, 16, 17 Renewing Mists out on a 20-man raid, which is most of their throughput at the moment. This is quite a substantial buff in PvP, in Mythic Plus, but a big nerf in raids. And that's honestly probably a good change. It's probably one of the best changes that any healer has gotten out of all of these patch notes. Burst of Life healing increased by 100%. This is the talent that causes your Life Cocoon to burst when it expires and heal, I believe, 3 people for like 100k at the moment. So that's going to become quite a chunky heal. The direct healing on Vivify increased by 30% and Clouded Focus now increases the healing and reduces the mana cost of Vivify and Enveloping Mist by 15% per stack was 20. Yeah, I don't think this is a big issue either. Clouded Focus will still be worth pressing, it'll still be worth playing around, it'll still be good, it just won't be as good. This is the interesting one, and this is the one that really makes me scratch my head with these changes. Ancient Teachings range increased by 10 yards to 40 yards. Okay, so Blizzard are obviously thinking about fist weaving, but for whatever reason, they're going to buff Soothing Mist, they're going to buff Enveloping Mist, they're going to buff Vivify, and they're going to completely ignore fist weaving. If this line wasn't here, I would think, you know, okay, well, Blizzard are just going to tackle fist weaving a little later. They're not thinking about that at the moment. They're just thinking about the casted healing of Mistweavers. And to be fair, like I said with the blue post about healing, it's pretty obvious here that Blizzard's only thought process here is raid healing. And these spells, casted healing, is how Mistweavers currently heal raid. Enveloping Mist, Soothing Mist, and Vivify. And the cleave on Invigorating Mists. This is how Mistweavers play the game. This is how they function in a raid environment. They do not fist weave in any meaningful sense. Which I guess makes sense because Blizzard have completely forgotten about fist weaving, or at least they just don't care enough about it at the moment. That whatever, who cares? We're only worried about raid throughput with these changes, so they're only looking at the spells that Mistweavers use and the way they heal in raid. That is overall a little bit disappointing, and again, this is the main issue I have with these patch notes. You know, a video gets made and says that raid healers in Mythic raid are too powerful, and that makes raid healing profiles and damage profiles too bursty. So Blizzard are now going to nerf healers globally, or they're going to buff some things globally. But they're obviously not thinking about how these things change in other environments in the game. Right, fist weaving in Mythic Plus is currently the way to play. It's not the only way to play, but it's pretty good. Or at least both fist weaving and casting variations or builds in Mythic Plus, for example, for Mistweavers are like equally kind of bad. But these set of changes just mean that casting is significantly better, but fist weaving completely forgotten about. So yeah, I don't know. Ancient Concordance is now 1 point instead of 2. Actually kind of a big deal because it allows fist weavers to take 1 extra talent. Now generally, the way fist weavers have to play at the moment is they have to take Shaylun's Gift branch and they have to obviously take the fist weaving branch, and there are no spare talent points. You can't take the other things that you might want, like the Mana T node or the TFT node or the extra TFT proc node or any of that kind of stuff. You don't have the room to take it. So the Ancient Concordance going from 2 points to 1 point is just 1 extra point. I don't think of this as much of a buff for fist weaving, but it is a kind of nice quality of life. The current tier 2 piece that returns so much mana has been redesigned. This was known. Everyone knew that this was going to happen. The 2 piece was put in place to effectively function like Mana T would, fixing the mana issues for Mistweaver, before Blizzard got around to making and implementing Mana T. But now that the new Mana T is in the game, the set piece can go away. This was pretty obvious because if you look at any of the raid logs from like last couple of weeks when Mana T has been in the game, Mana T and the 2-set bonus effectively returned the same amount of mana. But now that Mana T is in, the 2-set bonus that was kind of the band-aid fix for Mistweaver mana is going away. That makes sense, not a big deal. This one. Okay, so this is the line that got added a couple of hours ago. I made notes basically saying that there's no way in hell that the current Mistweaver set bonus or 2-piece bonus goes live. The way it was originally implemented was that every time you apply Renewing Mist to a target, or that Renewing Mist jumps to a new target, it applies a 50% healing buff to that target for 8 seconds. Like, it was a 2-piece that would have effectively given like a straight up 50% buff to Mistweaver throughput in Mythic Plus, which was obviously way too strong to go live. Like I mentioned previously, there are some set bonuses that were just like so wildly overpowered that there was no way in hell that they were going live, and this was one of them. This was also, funnily enough, one of the suggestions I was going to make. I originally thought that it would just get nerfed from a 50% bonus to maybe like a 10% bonus or a 15% bonus or something. And it would become good and powerful, but boring. And the other thought I had was, what happens if it's just, you can permanently have it on 1, maybe 2 targets if you bank your Renewing Mists, but it doesn't apply the buff when it Renewing Mist jumps, because that was the thing that was really going to make this thing powerful. And that is exactly what Blizzard have done, which is actually a really good change. It's still going to be a very strong set bonus, especially in smaller scale content like Mythic Plus. This 2 set is the ability to have a permanent healing cooldown active on someone. Honestly, I could see the 50% getting nerfed again, because the ability to go into a Mythic Plus group, or even like the ability to play a raid, Mistweavers would probably just become the tank healers, or at least they would do so much healing into specific targets that, yeah, it would be kind of wild. The buff lasts 8 seconds. Renewing Mist has a 9-second cooldown that can't be reduced by haste. That means that you could just keep a 50% healing buff on 1 target indefinitely. So yeah, in raid, I could see that being crazy strong. In Mythic Plus as well, this is a excellent addition to the Mistweaver toolkit. This is the answer to Mistweavers wanting to be more mobile, wanting to have more spot healing, wanting to have better tank healing. It's great. I'm really happy with this one, actually. I hope it doesn't get nerfed too much. Holy Paladin, all healing reduced by 3%. Yeah, that's a rough one to start with. Holy Light healing increased by 40%. Flash of Light by 30%. Daybreak now restores, I believe this is, yeah, less mana. Was 3,000, now 2,000 per glimmer consumed. Reclamation mana return, also very slightly nerfed. Glimmer of Light healing and damage is now increased by 4% per target, was 6. That's a pretty substantial nerf to that talent. And Glimmer of Light damage increased by 10%. Not a huge amount of changes here. One of the misgivings I have about 10.2 is the fact that Blizzard have stated their goals, and I don't know if they can pull it off, because it seems like a lot of these things are just, they don't have the knowledge. I think it's pretty clear that Blizzard don't really play healers much, or at least they certainly don't play some healers very much at all, because some things just get missed. It seems weird to me that you make a blue post, or Blizzard makes a blue post that says, we want to buff spot healing and we think single target healing should be more impactful. And then you look at the Holy Paladin changes and, Word of Glory, leave it the same as it is. Holy Shock, just leave that the way it is. Light of the Martyr, yeah, don't forget that talent even exists. Like, okay, you're going to buff Holy Light and Flash of Light, but all of the other single target healing that Holy Paladin has, and all the other talents they have built around other abilities for single target healing, are just going to get ignored. Doesn't make much sense to me, really. Priest. These guys copped a bit of a hiding. Power infusion nerfed from 25 to 20, and the duration reduced to 15 seconds from 20. Like a lot of the other patch notes here, it's the same but worse. It's a change that, yep, power infusion will be less powerful. You will still want to use it, and you will still want as many as you can in the raid, and you will still want to use it on the same targets and use it and play it in the exact same way you did before. It's just going to be worse. And it's kind of rough that I guess Shadow Priests just, ate the nerf to one of their major cooldowns, because power infusion was too strong on priest healers in raid, basically. The Shadow Word Death no longer reflects the amount of damage you deal back to you. It now deals 8% of the priest's maximum health. I quite like this. This is kind of nice. It does kind of invalidate the current talent that priests have on their class tree that reduces the amount of reflected Shadow Word Death damage you take, because getting hit for only 8% of your life really is no longer dangerous in almost every case. Even though they're nerfing the talent, it still doesn't seem like that big a deal, especially now that the backlash damage is now reduced by damage reduction effects. This is, I mean, yeah, this is a good change, but it also makes me think that there are a lot of talents in the game right now that were designed around toolkits that won't really work that way in 10.2. And this is just one of those examples, right? Like, here's Shadow Word Death, here's some talents to make Shadow Word Death backlash damage more manageable, and then they're kind of no longer needed because we're just going to nerf it anyway later on. Master Spell is now a 2-minute cooldown, was 45 seconds. Yeah, that's a rough one. I don't know. Blizzard kind of designed themselves into a corner here. They made things like Power Infusion and Mind Soothe and Master Spell, and they are all or nothing effects, especially Master Spell and Mind Soothe. They either work and they're incredibly powerful, or they do not work and they are utterly useless. There is no middle ground. Blizzard are trying to find the middle ground with Master Spell, I guess, but I don't... I guess the point I'm trying to make here is when Master Spell and Mind Soothe are useful, they feel mandatory. And when they're not useful, priests as a whole feel like they have absolutely nothing to bring to a party. Maybe Power Word Fortitude. Like, it's just... It's disappointing to see this all or nothing kind of playstyle exist because of bad encounter design, bad dungeon design, bad raid design, and then priests cop the nerf because the people designing the dungeons and the boss fights and stuff didn't think about Master Spell or Mind Soothe. The PvP talent for Master Spell is getting buffed so that this is not quite a neutral change in PvP, but close. Instead of 45 seconds, it'll be a minute cooldown. Not a huge deal, but again, this is the kind of thing where Blizzard are obviously making changes to toolkits that were not designed around how healers are going to be in 10.2, right? Like, Blizzard could nerf Master Spell and then buff the PvP talent for Master Spell and think, oh, you know, it comes out as a wash, it's not that bad. But now, that effectively means that in some comps and some situations, Disciplined Priests and Holy Priests have 2 PvP talents when everyone else has 3. Because the talent is now going to be so incredibly strong that if Master Spell is useful, the talent won't be an option. And in 10.2, priests will be able to talent with a PvP talent for a Master Spell that is as strong as it currently is without a talent. There's a new talent being added. Mental Agility reduces the mana cost of Purify, Purify Disease, and Master Spell by 50%. Incredibly boring. No one's going to take it. Discipline. This is the other healer that gets a significant, almost rework from 10.2 in the similar way that Resto Druid does. I think that Discipline Priest and Resto Druid are the 2 healers that are the largest X factors right now. Either they will be excellent or they will probably be pretty bad. I'm not quite sure. The goal of these changes is to simplify Discipline's damage rotation and reduce the number of stacking modifiers used when ramping up for burst healing. This should make it smoother to play by reducing the number of abilities pressed in sequence, allowing players to focus on managing atonement and triaging their allies instead. This is a raid change and nothing more. This is just to appease the disciplined players that step into a raid and they complain about having to press 10 buttons in perfect sequence to get their really good and big ramp. I would consider all of these changes a pretty big nerf for Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus. Maybe not power-wise. Discipline might still be quite good, but from a fun and kind of gameplay perspective, I might actually be hanging up my disc shoes. I don't know. In a previous video not too long ago, I talked about how fantastic and fun Discipline in Mythic Plus in particular felt. And most of the things in my estimation that make disc very fun to play at the moment are going away, which is not ideal. Like, it's a bit sad to see. But this could be changes that bring other people to disc. It could make it more enjoyable for other people. It's just, it isn't a direction that I particularly like. So Schism and Shadow Covenant have both been removed and have become, well, a new passive talent has been put in their place. I think what should have happened here is Schism and Shadow Covenant should have been put on the same node as a choice. But what's happening instead is that Schism is being removed and there'll be a new talent in its place that causes Mind Blast to increase your spell damage to the target by 10% for 9 seconds. When I first read this, I thought, well, that's kind of a bit weird because that means that you just always press Mind Blast every 9 seconds and then you always have a 10% spell damage buff to that target. But Mind Blast cooldown is going to 24 seconds from 9 and we're losing the double charge. That's probably the biggest feels bad change out of all of the changes for Discipline. Shadow Covenant has been redesigned to be a passive as well. When you press Shadow Fiend or Mindbender, you get the effects of Shadow Covenant. Unfortunately, you don't get the heal. You also don't get... I mean, look, Discipline is the is the healer that I feel like Blizzard have just kind of like, it worked a certain way. There were talents that all worked a certain way, and then Blizzard have just come in and be like, oh, we don't care about any of the other interactions with the rest of the kit. We're just going to make whatever changes we want, and who cares what happens? Because now that Schism is gone, and Shadow Covenant is gone, and Mind Blast's second charge is gone, and Mind Blast is becoming a 24-second cooldown, then there is no weaving between shadow and light spells because we don't have any shadow spells left. They're just gone. This is the same problem Disc had in like 10.0. So I guess the Discipline Priest capstone talent that rewards you for weaving between light and shadow spells will just be useless now. Dark Indulgence no longer grants a charge of Mind Blast, so yeah, losing the second charge, instead Mind Blast has a 100% chance to grant Power of the Dark Side. Horrible. Don't really like this at all. That also means we still have a random power, like Power of the Dark Side proc, but then another talent that also guarantees it every 24 seconds. But then it's like if you take the guaranteed one, you're not going to get full value out of it because sometimes it'll be up anyway, and no, I've tested on the PTR, it doesn't stack. They aren't separate buffs or anything. Inescapable Torment damage buffed by 60%. This is, and this line as well, Inescapable Torment now triggers from Penance, as well as Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death. This is supposed to make up for the complete gutting of Mind Blast as a spell. Its damage gets increased by 30%, who cares? We get to press it like 20% or 30% as often as we did before. Inescapable Torment is now a 1-point talent. You'll now be able to press Mindbender, and then press Mind Blast once, press Penance once, and 1 Shadow Word Death. So you'll get 3 procs of Inescapable Torment. Whereas at the moment, you can reliably bank on probably like 4, 5, maybe 6. So even with the 60% buff to Inescapable Torment, this is still a pretty big nerf. Power Word Solace has just been straight up removed, okay? Harsh Discipline has been reverted to the way it worked, I believe, back in early beta, or maybe this was last expansion? I can't remember when it was. Actually, yeah, sorry, it was a Shadowlands set bonus, where you have a 60% chance when you press Power Word Radiance to trigger Harsh Discipline. I hate this change. This feels like a 1 step forward, 2 step backwards kind of situation. Harsh Discipline was turned into a 4 Smite or 4 Mind Blast or 4 Solace or any combination therein buff to remove the random nature of Harsh Discipline, or well, the effect that used to grant the same thing as Harsh Discipline. And now we're going back to it. There are also quite a few game modes, there were quite a few times where you could play around Harsh Discipline and play Discipline Priest without having to press Radiance. You could play 2s and 3s without having to press Radiance at all. You could just apply your atonements with Power Word Shield or keep them active with Flash Shield or whatever, and you could just play a very damage-focused Smite, Mind Blast, Solace, heavy playstyle, and you could weave all of those buttons together with light and dark buffs from their capstone, and you could get very good value out of Harsh Discipline, and very good value out of Expiation, and Twilight Empowerment, and all those kind of things. And now, all of that's going away. You just have to press Power Word Radiance, and then sometimes you get a proc, and sometimes you don't. This takes power out of the player's hands. It's not just a matter of like, the spec is simplified, it's a little bit easier to play. This is like, well, you take the talent, and then you play the same way. Whether you have the talent or not, whether you get the proc or not, everything's the same. I hate this. New talent, Smite prevents the next 80% of damage dealt by the enemy. This is a bit of a typo. It's 80% spell power. This is what Mind Blast used to have. It's now being added to Smite. I guess it's okay. One of the things I have thoroughly enjoyed about Dragonflight up until now has been that Discipline has been added, it's had so much depth added to the spec. I would say in the past you could have typified or characterized Discipline by just a healer that, well, you apply your atonements and then you spam Penance or Smite, but that was it. And with the introduction of Schism, Shadow Covenant, Mind Blast, the double charge on Mind Blast, the way that those abilities all interact together, the addition of the Mind Bender and Void Summoner branch, there were a lot more options that made the damaging aspect or the damaging part of Discipline's toolkit more enjoyable. and much more nuanced, and it had a lot more depth, and you could like plan around what you're about to do and which button to press when, and you had options. And it seems like all of that is just going away. Discs are going to return to the healer that just presses penance on cooldown and spams smite. End of story. The new talent. This is really fun to press on the PTR. It looks incredibly good. I hope it's enough to make disc enjoyable. You ascend into the air and unleash a massive barrage of penance bolts, but not really, because they're not actually penance bolts, causing holy damage to enemies or healing to allies over 6 seconds. On the PTR at the moment, this is bugged. You can't hit allies, it only hits enemies. While ascended, gain a shield for 50% of your health. So that's, I mean, this is cool, right? The cool factor on this is off the charts. Like I said, it looks sick. It's incredible. The problem is it doesn't work with any of the rest of the toolkit. We can't, because of bugs, we can't test if it works with contrition, but it doesn't work with any other penance or penance bolt related talents at all. So I doubt it's going to work with contrition. We also don't know if there's a way to make this target only enemies or only allies, or unknown at the moment. A new talent, each penance bolt you fire reduces the cooldown of ultimate penitence by 2 seconds. Unfortunately, this doesn't work with the penance bolts fired by the abilities. So it doesn't say here, but this ultimate penitence talent is a 4-minute cooldown. Now, if the penance bolts it fired reduced its own cooldown, it would basically become almost a 3-minute cooldown. But they don't work that way. It also doesn't work with anything else. Power of the Dark Side doesn't buff it. The talent that gives penance an extra bolt doesn't give it an extra bolt. Like I said, we can't test it with contrition, but I doubt it works. It can't be altered or adjusted or buffed by any other part of the discipline toolkit at all. It doesn't work with Twilight Empowerment. You just press it, it does its thing, it doesn't interact with the rest of your toolkit whatsoever, which is a little bit disappointing, although it is extremely powerful. And this is... it feels a little bit interesting, or I guess weird, that Blizzard would make a blue post where they talk about how they want rotational healing to be stronger, they want spot healing to be stronger, they want group healing, cooldown healing to be lower, and then they do this to discipline, where they effectively gut its rotational and sustained throughput and buff, well, give it a whole new, very powerful cooldown. New talent, Ultimate Penitence, emits an explosion of light, healing up to 10 allies around you, and applying atonement to 50% of its normal duration. This is just, you always want to take this if you're going to play Ultimate Penitence, you always want the Overloaded with Light talent. It's really good. Penance damage increased by 15%. Yeah, okay. Penance healing increased by 30%. Yep, okay. It makes Penance a more powerful spot heal, which is kind of nice, I guess. But like I said, this is it's like a piecemeal approach. Someone's done a pass, they've buffed some spells, but just forgotten others. Like, okay, we're going to buff Penance healing by 30%, but we forgot about Power Word Life. Power Word Barrier nerfed from 25% reduction to 20. Atonement now heals for 32% of damage done was 40. Large nerf, but this is only for Raid and I guess Battlegrounds. This is Discipline's version of all the other healers having their AoE healing lowered. Well, some of the other healers having their AoE healing lowered. Atonement healing now increased by 50% when not in a raid. This is, oh man, there's a lot of people cheering right now when they, cheering into their monitors when they read this. This is what a lot of Discipline priests have been asking for a long time. This is huge. It isn't quite as big as it might seem, because Atonement is now only going to heal for 32% of damage was 40. So it's copping a bit of a nerf there, but then the 50% buff will counteract that in Mythic Plus, and then it buff it a little bit more as well. So yeah, that's huge. Flash healing increased by 40%, Power Word Shield by 10. Yeah, okay, that's good. Divine Aegis is now a 1-point talent, was 2. Another nice little buff. Light's Wrath and the talents linked to it, or the tree for it, has been removed. So instead of Light's Wrath, discs will now have Ultimate Penitence. It's just a way better, way stronger cooldown in the same place. Overall though, look, if all of these changes were the exact same, except the Mind Blast change, and except the Solace change, I would be over the moon happy with Discipline. But the Mind Blast change it really kills it for me. When I go into keys, or when I play disc, especially with talents like Expiation and the Void Summoner tree, pressing Mind Blast feels... I get so much of my current Atonement throughput from Mind Blast, and so much enjoyment of the spec is about weaving Mind Blasts in between other light spells or pressing your Mind Blast to Atonement Heal before your big 20 stack Rhapsody, Holy Nova, things like that. It's really sad to see all of that go away. This is the one, if this was undone, I would be 11 out of 10 hyped for Discipline. But this one change, like it really, it kills it in a big way to me. I don't want Discipline to go back to just pressing Penance on cooldown and spamming Smite in between. That's really boring. Holy Word Serenity healing increased by 30%, Flash Heal by 40%. Salvation's cooldown gets nerfed, it gets half the CDR or cooldown reduction that it did. Symbol of Hope now restores less mana, quite a big nerf, but again, they want, mana to be impactful. Symbol of Hope recovers 40 seconds of cooldowns instead of 60. Holy Word Sanctify now heals 5 allies instead of 6. Divine Star healing increased by 25%. Halo healing decreased, Divine Star and Halo decreased by 25 and 15%. Now, this one. Oh, I was going to complain about this. I keep coming back to the same thing. This is I know it's the first draft, but Blizzard have identified a problem. They probably watched Theon's video. They went into work the next day and were like, yeah, he's totally right. Let's nerf healers in Mythic Raid because it's too spiky. They're too powerful. And then I guess it became someone's job in the office to buff the single target spells and nerf the AoE ones. Unfortunately, whatever developers are responsible for all of this, it's extremely obvious that they do not play some healers. Like Holy Priest? No. Because when these patch notes first got released, Holy had this line, Flash Heal increased by 40%, but they completely forgot Heal. How do the developers of a game change? They're like, okay, we want to change healers, but they obviously have so little knowledge of healers that they completely forgot that heal exists for Holy Priest. Holy Priests have a whole capstone dedicated to allowing or incentivizing players to alternate between flash heal and heal. And then the developers responsible for balancing the game completely forgot that heal even exists as a spell. And it took them a week to be like, oh, actually, yeah, our bad. We completely forgot that heal exists because we don't play Holy Priest, I guess. So we've got it now, though. And it's like, man, how many other things have they forgotten? A lot. I could probably complain about this 10.2 patch for 5 hours. And then we get to Restoration Shaman. Pour one out for our boys, dude. Mana Spring, mana nerf. This has been buffed and nerfed like 5 times. Blizzard can't, this expansion, they can't seem to kind of land on a good number for this. It's, for Enhancement Shamans, it's been nerfed from 250 to 150. 150 for Restoration Shamans was 350. Oh man, it's getting a massive nerf. And it used to be even stronger than this. And Elemental is going to be 100, was 150. Healing Stream Totem increased by 20%. Healing Surge increased by 30. Healing Wave increased by 30. Primordial Wave replicates Healing Wave at 40% effectiveness, was 60. Cloudburst Totem now accumulates 50% less of your healing done. Ascendance now duplicates 80% of all healing, was 100. Mana Time Totem now increases mana regeneration by 100%. 80% was 100. Resurgence now restores 20% less mana. These nodes down here, again, were added today, a couple of hours ago, and forgotten in the original patch. And even now, they're going to buff Riptide's initial heal, but they completely forgot about Holy Shock for Paladins, which is effectively the same button. It's the same sort of button. Forgot about Light of the Martyr, forgot about Word of Glory, forgot about Light of Dawn. I mean, Holy Paladins are now going to go, I'm sure there will be iteration, but from Blizzard's first draft, maybe they will go live as they currently are. But that means Holy Light as a generator is going to heal for more than Word of Glory does as the spender. And then, yeah, Resto Shamans. Everything gets nerfed. Well, a lot of things get nerfed. Resurgence now restores less mana, and the Mana Spring nerf, kind of rough. Mana Tide Totem nerf as well. Ascendance, Cloudburst, all nerfed. Primordial Wave that no one likes playing anyway, nerfed. And then as a response, you get your Riptide buffed, your Healing Stream, Healing Surge, Healing Wave buffed. And Unleash Life healing increased by 40%. That isn't really going to change much. That's not a big deal. One of the things I'm quite scared of happening is Blizzard make these kind of changes without a holistic look at the spec. We want Resto Shaman healing, single target healing to be stronger. Let's buff Riptide, let's buff Healing Stream, buff Healing Surge, buff Healing Wave. Okay, cool. Chain Heal is now no longer worth pressing, ever. Resto Shaman it's the healer that I probably feel sorry for the most in these patch notes. I don't think that they're particularly good at anything right now. They aren't crazy strong raid healers. They're decent in Mythic Plus, but they're not holy paladins. They kind of suck in PvP in almost every way, and now they're eating nerfs to a significant part of their toolkit that requires some skill to play. Things like Cloudburst, knowing when to hit Ascendance and getting good value out of your Ascendance. And they're going to be turned into just a bot that spams 3 buttons. You press Riptide on cooldown, and then you press Healing Surge or Healing Wave. And you drop Healing Stream Totem again, probably on cooldown. You probably play Healing Stream because Cloudburst gets nerfed. So you're a bot spec. You just spam the same buttons over and over again. And you're going to log in on patch day, and you're going to zone into the new raid, and you're just going to be weaker than you were before. This also creates, all of these changes also create issues with balance among healers. Not only does it make healing in general weaker, there are some definite winners and losers out of this patch. These Resto Shaman changes mean that pressing Chain Heal is basically now never a good option. And playing around Cloudburst Totems and Ascendance and giving mana back to your raid and that kind of thing, all nerfed in very big ways, which means that Resto Shamans become spot healing bots. They're going to press Healing Wave, they're going to press Healing Surge, they're going to drop Healing Stream Totems. What happens if there are other healers that fill that spot healing role better than Resto Shamans? And Resto Shamans no longer bring exceptionally good cooldowns, or at least not as good cooldowns. And raid damage patterns get lowered, and healing profiles become less reliant or less bursty and less reliant on cooldowns. Where does Resto Shaman fit into a healing roster in that world, right? Are you really going to invite or bring or play a Resto Shaman in a raid environment to press Healing Wave and Riptide 900 times? Surely there are going to be other healers that do the same thing but better. This video is long enough, so I'm probably going to make another one where I talk about set bonuses in the next couple of days, and then there'll be probably another one for every healer. I have been playing them quite a lot on the PTR, and I'm going to be talking about how they feel, how the changes are shaping up. And I'll be doing this as all of these changes and 10.2 gets iterated upon, and Blizzard makes more and more changes. Hopefully gets closer to the mark. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and algorithm stuff.